When I look at a landscape or whatever, I look at lines and triangles and squares and circles and V shapes. And when I look at those things that way, I put, okay, this tree could come in from this corner, or those clouds kind of align and make a V shape with this mountain. I kind of look at it in a little piecemeal.
Welcome to the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast, the show helping outdoor enthusiasts land your ideal gig in the outdoor industry so you can grow your outdoor career and find more time for your adventures. I'm your host, Rick Says. Let's get after it. Today on episode 465, I'm talking with Sergio Ballivian, brought to you this week by Alabama Beaches and Rome Generation PR. For over 40 years, Sergio has pursued his passion for adventure, always with a camera in hand. Sergio Photo Tours was born from those experiences, a desire to share the unique moments he's witnessed and to guide others in capturing the beauty and essence of those untamed places. Sergio says this isn't just about taking photos, it's about experiencing the world from a different perspective. Welcome to the show, Sergio.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, look forward to talking to you. It's always fun to talk to other photographers. I learn a little something along the way every time, it seems like.
Always something to learn, man, all the time.
No kidding, yeah. So let's start with your first adventure, your first outdoor adventure. Where was that? What was that?
That was probably when I was in high school in Bolivia. We went to, at one point, was the highest ski resort in the world. It was at 17,400 feet above sea level. And so you could drive from La Paz, hop out of the canyon onto the Altiplano, and then drive up into the Royal Mountain Range, the Cordillera Real. And at the top of the road there, you were still another 500 feet from the actual summit, but there was a parking lot and there was a shack. There was the lodge. The lodge is kind of a...
Bigger shack.
Yeah, bigger shack with bigger windows. But the shack had a motor. It had a truck, a 1944 Power Wagon, a chassis with a motor in it, and a guy would drive it, and they would put a cable across the axle onto the steel wheel. Wow. And he would drive it 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4, 3, 2, 1, so that when you were going to hitch onto that cable at the bottom of the glacier, you had this hook that was made out of rebar with a 6-foot piece of rope and a dowel rod or a piece of wood that you would stick between your legs. And then you would just get at the bottom, get into your T stance, and then wait for him to slow down. And then you would take your turn and then hook this hook on, and then you would be pulled up to the top of the glacier for about 2 kilometers. And then you have to be careful when you have to pull it off, because at the top, the cable began this spiraling thing. And many years later, I got caught in that, and it caught me and then dragged me to the top of the thing, ripped my jacket off of my arm. And then finally, the thing that saved me was the whole thing fell on top of my head. The whole thing. And so that's what saved me. Otherwise, it probably could have taken my arm off. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. And how far?
That wasn't the first time. That was I was dragged probably 150 yards or something like that.
Jeez. That's crazy.
It was a long way.
Yeah, that's crazy. And how far down was this? So you ski down? How long would it take you to ski down?
You could, if you were a really good skier, you could be down in 4 or 5 minutes.
Oh,
it wasn't a lot.
So you get a lot of reps in. You had to ride that cable a lot. That's scary.
Yeah, you had to ride the cable a lot. But they could only take 10 people at a time because of however the engineering was, there's only so much that truck could pull.
Right.
So you have this massive 1-inch steel cable, and it has to go across all the pulleys were wheels from trucks. So very rudimentary. But
got the job done.
Yeah, but that was one of my best adventures early on when I was a rug rat in high school, when I was in La Paz.
Very cool. Yeah, we had T-bars when I was in high school, rode T-bars, yeah.
This is the Bolivian version of the T-bar. Yeah.
How about your first camera? When did you get your first camera?
I got a Rolei 35S, which was a camera that a friend of mine she had in high school. And she had a bunch of money. She had lots of extra things. And I said, hey, are you interested in selling that camera? Yeah, sure, why not? So the 35S was a square little camera that you press the button and you would pull out the lens and twist it. And then you had to dial in the ISO, shutter speed, and aperture so that you could actually use the meter on top of the camera. And so I learned how to use that and understood that in order to get a proper picture, you need to line the needle with the circle, and though you have to move these little buttons.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand what those numbers meant, but then she gave me kind of a crash course, and then that little thing fit in my pocket, and it went everywhere with me. Like,
Wow.
it went, to the jungles. I went to the Altiplano, to the Andes when I was doing some mountaineering, stuff like that. So it was the greatest thing ever.
And probably help you a lot later, because you learned all the things that had all the mysterious numbers and things that had to be correct to get a good image, right?
Yes. In the good
To
old
manipulate the
days,
image.
in the good old days when you had film,
Yeah.
you actually had to understand how to shoot. You need
Yeah.
to understand ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, because if you got that wrong, there wasn't much forgiveness in film. If you had neg film, okay, you had maybe a stop and a half of latitude. But if you were shooting chromes, like slides, which is what I've always shot, then you had maybe half a stop where you could be off. Otherwise, it's overexposed or underexposed, and it's over. So it's very
Yeah.
good learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Very good
that's where I
learning.
learned how to understand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So how were you inspired to become a photographer? Did you have someone you followed or a friend?
Well, some of my friends in Bolivia, they all had 4x4s, and they all had, cameras. And I didn't have anything. I mean, I wasn't a painter, I wasn't a writer, but I had my little 35S, and I figured, you know what, I want to share my photos with my mom and my friends. And in those days in Bolivia, you could shoot slide film, but few people could process it. So
Yeah, right.
print film was the only option. So you'd get AGFA film or whatever it is that you can get your hands on, shoot it and take it, and they would process it and give you a bunch of 4x6s, 3x5s, whatever they would give you, and then you get 2 or 3 copies. And then so I would just distribute that around to my friends. Hey, this is where we were, etc. So it was, for me, it was a way of sharing. That's how it kind of became. And then little by little, somehow I managed to really understand how to take a proper photo. And then people would mention, hey, that's a real nice photo. Can I get a copy? This and that, whatever. I said, sure, why not? And then so I realized, okay, I need to get better at this. So I upgraded when I went back to the States after high school to a Canon A1. And so then I got A1 with a motor. Then I got my
Then you were
my
hooked.
35. Yeah, my 35 to 105, my 100 to 300. I got a 500 millimeter mirror lens and the whole that stuff. And I said, okay, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow, that's cool. Do you remember the first photo you sold?
The first photo I sold, man, I don't remember it, but it probably had to be somewhere in the early 80s. I graduated in 1981 in Bolivia in high school, from the American high school. So probably a year or two after that, I probably sold a print to somebody because they saw it I had a little show at a small gallery that a friend
Oh,
had owned.
nice. Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was like, yeah. So I got 10 photos up on the wall with my little frames and stuff like that. Nothing fancy, but it was like, hey, that's cool, man. People can see my stuff.
Right. That's exciting when you do that, right? It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I had 20x30s on the wall. It was like 8x10s. Like that's
Right.
as good as it got at that point because
Right.
I was
Right.
the one
Right.
working over the money.
Yeah. Got to start somewhere. Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
remember when and where your first photo workshop was? When did you start that?
Well, the first one that I did was probably the same year that I started Sergio Photo Tours.
Okay.
That was in 1996. But before that, I had Explore Bolivia. And so Explore Bolivia was kind of the catalyst of Sergio Photo Tours. And so I was doing adventures. I was taking people kayaking, whitewater kayaking, sea kayaking on Lake Titicaca, mountain biking in Bolivia, trekking, climbing, stuff like that. In those years, I was guiding mountains and stuff like that.
Oh,
So,
wow.
but I decided that guiding mountains was kind of dangerous, especially with some of the type of clients that I had. I say, oh man, this is not fun. This is serious business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary.
So I moved into the photography world, and then it just turned out that it became a workshop. I was teaching people how to shoot, and hey, can you give me some tips? I want to take photos of. So we were at the Salt Flats. So this is really beautiful, but I don't know how I'm going to get the best photos. Okay, well, let's try some different angles. And little by little, it got to the point where, I guess this is going to be officially, I'm going to be doing photography tours. So that was kind of like my non-professional workshop that I began
Yeah.
until it got more polished.
Yeah.
And then as time went by, then it's okay. Let's say everybody brings a laptop. Then we have a screen and a projector and stuff like that.
Mhm. So
So
when did that happen? When did you start really be running a full professional workshop where you went out and shot, and then you went back and
probably
processed and
around
then critiqued
2000,
everybody? 2000? Yeah. Okay.
around 2000 or so. That's when it really got more serious. Okay,
Mhm.
folks, you gotta. I would send them pre-departure information. Okay, you gotta have
Yeah.
all these things. You gotta have these kind of things, and you gotta bring a laptop, and you gotta bring your hard drives, and you gotta have the software. So, using Room and Photoshop, etc.
Yeah.
So the way I do it is I just want to keep it as simple as possible. We don't go into Photoshop. We just use Lightroom.
Mm-hmm.
Lightroom
Oh,
can
Lightroom's so
handle
powerful these days.
it can handle
Yeah.
most things that most people need. And if you need to hammer your pixels with Photoshop, then you move it into Photoshop and do whatever you need to do. Then you can bring it over to Lightroom again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. And were
yeah.
you doing these workshops at that point in exotic locations like climbing, or were you just doing scenic locations?
Most of them were in Bolivia, and
Hmm.
most of the stuff that I tended to do were landscape stuff. So we would
Gotcha.
travel mostly across the Altiplano,
Yeah.
Lake Titicaca. We would go into the mountains to do landscape photography, but we wouldn't really be doing any kind of climbing.
Yeah. That's a whole nother
Um,
level of.
it's a whole different, that's a whole different thing. And besides, when you're going to do actual workshops, you got to have hotels and you
Yeah.
got to have beds and you got to have proper meals and you got to have tables and electricity and all that good stuff. So
Right.
when you're up in the mountains, yeah, you go for the day, but you come back to a proper hotel someplace where it
Yeah.
could be in the city or out in the countryside, you
Yeah.
know.
That makes sense. Yeah. So what goes through your mind when you're deciding to capture an image? What speaks to you? What pulls you into say, I want to shoot that?
Well, for some reason, I tend to look at photos in kind of like geometric patterns. When I look at a landscape or whatever, I look at like lines and triangles and squares and circles
Hmm.
and like V shapes, things like that. And when I look at those things that way, I put, okay, this tree could come in from this corner, or those clouds can align and make a V shape with this mountain. And then okay, maybe there's a lake. There's okay, so this lake is kind of a circle, or it's a rectangle that could add a little bit, but I don't want to add too much to it. And then so I just put it. I kind of look at it in a little piecemeal. Like
Hmm.
okay,
Hmm.
where do these elements fit, and how where do I have to move to put this cloud here, or do I have to wait 5 minutes for this cloud to move here, or where is the cloud going? Oh, the cloud's going to the wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's one of those situations in which I visually, I'm excited by what I'm looking at, but
Hmm.
then I try to put it together in such a manner so that there's balance.
Yeah. And you always have to wait for the conditions to get just right.
Yeah.
So what about extreme conditions when you're out there and the weather's blowing and the snow's flying? And how does that enter do you wait for
Well,
things to get worse or better? What do you?
yeah, those kind of conditions, in my opinion, are the ones that are really the best
I
because
agree. Yeah.
they have they have a kind of a spirit. And what you want to capture is that moment, what you're feeling that you're being whipped by the wind, or it's cold and it's super freezing, or it's raining sideways, or it's kind of you're crossing a river and the water is real powerful, and then you might be taken down and go for a swim. Those are the things that I think about that I want to capture.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you always have to be careful from the safety aspect because you don't want
Yeah.
to hurt yourself or hurt someone else. But also, you don't want to drown or destroy your cameras
That's right.
because those suckers are expensive. And I don't have 10 cameras lying around. I got 2, 3 cameras. Sometimes I have 2 cameras with me, etc. But I'm always careful about the situation. But in extreme conditions, I prepare for everything that could happen in a day. So I got my outer gear, my insulating layer, I've got proper footwear, I got glasses and lightweight gloves and all that kind of stuff. In case the stuff goes really nasty,
Mhm.
then I have what I need. If it gets really good, then I can just peel all that stuff off. So in extreme conditions, you always want to prepare for what's happening currently and what's going to happen down the line.
Yeah.
So right
Yeah.
now, say, hey, it's sunny skies and whatever. but there's a storm coming in maybe 6 hours. Okay, well, and I need to be someplace in 6 hours, and I'm going to be in the middle of the storm, so I need to prepare for that, etc. So you have to think ahead because you need
Mm-hmm.
to prepare not only for your safety, but the safety of others, and
Right.
make sure everybody's got what they're supposed to have. And you got to check. You got to physically say, "Hey, can you show me
Do you
your
have your
jacket?
jacket? Yeah, let me see that.
You actually have your gloves with you. Oh, you didn't leave them behind in the room,
Right.
and the boots and all that stuff, and your headlamp and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, right?"
Have you ever had an incident where your camera fell or got blown over or just got somehow
Oh yeah,
hammered?
yeah. Well, it was some years ago. I was rafting the Tuichi, and I was rowing one of the rafts, and there was like three rafts, two catarafts, three kayaks, and we were going through some rapids. And I totally missed the line and hit a rock.
Eesh.
The thing spun me, and then I went into this rapid sideways, and then it flipped me like
Mhm.
super quick. But what was happening is right before I was going to hit the rapid, I had plenty of time. I had my Pelican case strapped to the raft, but it was open, and I had a
Oh,
Pentax 6x7. And the Pentax had a strap on it, and the strap was around my neck. And so I shot my photo because it was this beautiful jungle scene, and there was the lianas and the big tree and the water and the whole thing. And I shot my photo, threw my camera back in, and I slammed the lid back on it and shut it. But the strap was just coming out a little bit off to the side, which I didn't realize. And so when I flipped and the boat was flipped over, it was upside down for, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes or something like that.
wow.
By the time it got flipped over, and then I finally sort of make sure I didn't lose anything else, like any gear or whatever, etc., I realized, oh, I should look at my cameras. And then I open up the Pelican, and of course, water had got in. So all the
Oh,
foam was kind of humid, and the camera was
right.
humid. Oh, man. And
Bummer.
I knew at that point that I had drowned my camera.
Oh man, yeah, I hate when that happens.
And then I took the camera down to the Altiplano like a week or so later, and I hadn't done anything to it. I didn't think that I should, okay, pull the roll out, open up the camera, and let it dry out. I just left it in. And so when I was shooting these boiling mud pits, and the steam was coming out of it, I was cranking through the film, and then I go crick, 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 and say, "Oh man, I just blew through my film. I just tore it up."
Really?
And then I realized that the film had swollen, and then it was done. The camera was done, and the film was done. So
That's a bummer.
it's one of those things that happens. And I've done that a few times.
I had something wrong with the episode we dropped today, but I'll have to fix it later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that one time. I forget what we were shooting, but we got done shooting, got back to the car, and I put my camera on top of the car. And we're doing all our stuff, and then we take off, and I hear this flapping noise, and I look in the rearview mirror just in time to see the camera rolling off the roof, bounce into the street.
That's
And
terrible.
all it
That
did was
hurts.
smash the hot shoe. It was totally fine.
That's it?
That's it. Crazy.
Man, you lucked out.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Some of those
Yeah.
cameras are made. I mean, it was a Nikon, so some of those
Yeah,
cameras are
they're
bomber.
beefy, you know.
Yeah.
What I've learned over the years is that whenever I go someplace, what I do is I grab my camera, I take it off my shoulder, and then I put it on the ground next to me on the floor.
Uh-huh.
And that does two things. One, it reminds me that I have to pick up my camera when I leave. And second, when it's on the floor, it can't fall any further than the floor. It's already there.
That's
It's not going to fall off the chair. It's not going to fall off
right.
the top of the table or anything. And I do that. And I don't have any problem if I kick it or I push it with my feet or whatever. It doesn't harm it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might
They're
get a
pretty
little bit
tough. Yeah.
scuffed, but that's a good way for me to make sure that I don't inadvertently drop my cameras, which I've also have done.
I think we all have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Lightroom and Photoshop. How has technology impacted the modern outdoor photography, and how do you leverage it to enhance your work?
Well, in the good old days of, like I said earlier, in the good old days of photography, you had to learn how to shoot. You need to know your settings.
Yeah.
I think today the cameras, the metering, to be more specific, is so incredible nowadays that you can aim at something and shoot it. And if your settings are on some sort of automatic setting, whether it be shutter speed priority, aperture priority, or P for professional, or whatever it is that they have,
it's going to be probably okay. It's going to be
Yeah.
probably just fine, and then you can tweak it just a little bit later. So that has come a long ways, and also the image stabilization that's either built into the bodies and the lenses, and sometimes you get systems like some of the Nikons or the Canons or the Sonys that have both systems. They have image stabilization in both camera and lenses, and so with that, you can shoot 3, 4 stops at a lower shutter speed and still get incredibly good results, sharp photographs. So that technology is hard to beat. And obviously autofocusing, the autofocusing nowadays is so tremendous, so exact that I'd say probably most people nowadays can't shoot without autofocus.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
I used to be able pretty good in manual focus, but there's no way I could manually focus anything quicker than the autofocusing
Yep.
systems
Mm-hmm.
nowadays. They're so good and they keep getting better.
Yeah.
There's some of them you can program, like, okay, I need you to find the bird's eye, and that's where you should focus. You know, some of the Olympus have that. And it's like, it's amazing. They find the bird's eye, and
It's voice
that's
activated?
technology. Pardon me?
Voice activated?
No, you can dial it in. You
Yeah,
can dial it
yeah.
in through the menu options.
Oh, I
And
see.
some of the cameras have touch screens that you can tap, okay, focus here or whatever you need to do.
Yeah, yeah.
It's tremendous. I mean, technology is beautiful, man. I
Yeah,
love
the
it.
combination of camera and something like Lightroom or Photoshop, it's just unbelievable. I mean, and
I
you can
mean,
do a bunch of images in a second.
yeah, you can shoot a panoramic, not thinking through it too much. Say, okay, I got 10
Right.
photos I shot left to right to left, or whatever, and I missed one, whatever. You tell it, okay, put it all together. Boom, then you have a pano.
Yeah.
In a matter of a few seconds or maybe a minute, you have a panoramic that is good enough to print and put up on the wall.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. So you work in remote, wild places. Can you share any memorable experience that you've had during your adventures? Is there one place that stands out where everything went to hell or everything went beautifully? Or...
Well, when I did it's interesting you mentioned that. When I did the first descent of the Tuichi River in what is now
yeah,
Medellin
but that
National
was wild.
Park in Bolivia, that was in 1996. So I worked at Geographic from 91 to 96 in the photo department with the technicians, and then I left. I said, okay, I got to do my own thing. I started Explore Bolivia while I was working at National Geographic as a side hustle in 94. And so I left in 96 in May. And in August of 96, we did the first descent of the Tuichi from Apolo. So we ran this one river, which is never run before, a class 3, 4, and then a Tuichi. And we had prepared for waterfalls, like big waterfalls, right? Because the book that I read back from the Tuichi by Yossi Ginsberg was the inspiration for doing that trip. And in those days, I was doing a lot of kayaking on the Potomac River and stuff like that, and I did a lot of river stuff. And I was climbing, etc. So, okay, yeah, no problem. We'll take harnesses and ropes. And so we took like another 50, 60 pounds of gear with us, and we ran the Tuichi. And that's where I almost drowned, running the same rapid that Yossi Ginsberg had run when he ran into it when he was on a balsa wood raft. So I was kayaking. I got to the top of the rapid. The raft had gone down. The other kayaker had gone down. My turn to sweep. And then as soon as I braced at the top of the rapid, my paddle broke in half. And it broke in half, and I said, oh, I'm screwed now. So I just put it together as if it was like a canoeing paddle, and I tried to paddle on both sides, but the rapids were way too much for me. It was class 4. It was probably 4 plus.
Wow.
With certain water levels, it becomes a 5. And man, I just got beat up, and then finally it flipped me over, and then I got stuck upside down in the kayak in a rapid. I said, man, I'm going to die. At that point, I had completely lost the paddle. I just pulled the skirt, and then it flushed me out, and I managed to hang on to the kayak, and then the kayak flushed out, and then the kayak went, and I basically hung onto the kayak the whole rapid, and the rapid is about 400 meters long.
Wow.
And then I ended up at the bottom of the pool, and then there I was, survived it, and luckily I had an extra paddle inside the kayak. And so I was a little bit bruised up and beat up.
That could have pinned you somewhere. And
oh man, that was the closest I've come to dying.
Yeah, man, that's scary.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, I have a story similar, but we won't tell it today. But yeah, it's once you go through that, boy, it really changes your perspective, right?
Totally. And in that time, and the only people that were going up to Ichi were the people who were cutting mahogany, illegally cutting mahogany. They would go up in boats up to that rapid. They couldn't go past that rapid. And so it was full on jungle. Like there was no one around. I mean, there was monkeys and there was jaguar prints on the side, on the beaches where we camped. And it was just tremendous. It was full on adventure, the real deal. No Hollywood stuff. You know?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. We ran out of food and we only had like rice in a chocolate bar after day number 7. And then we had no idea. We didn't have anything for fishing or anything like that. And we ran into this dude who was on a boat who was camped on the side of the river. And he said, "Hey, can you tell us where we are?" And he looked at me like, "Who the hell are you?" Because we had our helmets and these bright colored jackets and life jackets and whatever. So, well, yeah, you're a long way from Rurrenabaque. It's like, yes, I guess so. But how far? Oh, it'll take us like 8 hours to get there. I said, oh, in a motorized boat.
Oh my God. Wow.
So it would have probably taken us 5 days if we were going to float it. So I said, "Hey, do you have room for us?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So
that's cool.
We camped there.
Yeah.
He fed us whatever he had. It was real basic stuff. And then the next morning we hopped on his boat and he took us down to Rurrenabaque. It was like, whoa. True adventure. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I was on the Carnali with some Sobek folks one time.
Oh.
And it was hotter than hell in Kathmandu. And the guys, the previous group said it was hotter than hell. You don't need your sleeping bag. You don't need this. You don't need that. So a bunch of people left some stuff behind. And it's a 2-day walk to get to the put-in. We got to the put-in and it started raining. And it rained for like 2 days. And people are there without sleeping bags, without all this stuff. So we hung out. And in the meantime, the river just came up and became a raging torrent. And we had to go, right? So we loaded everybody in. Every boat but the one I was in flipped. We had a couple people after the flip. We got everybody to the side. And they were an older couple. They wanted to walk out. And it's like, well, there's nowhere to walk to. We're in the middle of in Nepal. You can't walk. You got to go downstream.
Yeah.
But it was, when you get into those situations, it's all hands on deck and you kind of have to double check everybody. And it's wild.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's when the real deal shows up, you need to have a certain kind of mentality.
Yeah.
It's not like, well, where's the helicopters? There's no helicopters here.
That's right.
There's no rangers. You got to figure this out. That's why you're here, supposedly.
That's why you want to do this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Most of our group was, all except these 2 folks were able, but they were a little freaked out. You can imagine.
I've been freaked out. I've had experiences.
Yeah,
but
same.
You got to keep it together.
You got to keep your head about you. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
We can't send you to Alabama's beaches without a list of locals' favorite spots to grab a bite and refreshing libation. A few you don't want to miss are the Flying Harpoon, a local hangout with fried fish and drinks, Sea and Suds, a longtime seafood shack, Liquid Latitude with a solid craft beer collection, Big Beach Brewing serves beers made exclusively in-house, and the Gulf, a casual yet chic seaside hideaway where the sun and sand and lush beach setting complement the tasty food and drink and friendly casual service. Recline with your toes in the sand, have a seat at the bar or a communal table, or meander about. Enjoy the good vibes, views, and tunes. They spin vinyl and accent their unique shipping container design with recycled, reclaimed, and salvaged building materials and make concerted efforts to practice sustainability and reduce their carbon footprint. Now let's get back to the show. So sustainability and conservation are increasingly important topics in the outdoor space as the world shrinks and more people come about. How do you ensure that your photo practices align with environmental stewardship principles?
Well, that's a tough one, man, because honestly, I do my tours in South America.
Oh, and so it's a little looser down there.
What are my options? I can fly, or I can drive, or I can take a ship, and I can walk. None of them are going to work except the flying part. So I fly there. I have really no choice. And then we go to these remote areas. And once again, we don't do public transport. We all do private vehicles, 4x4s, like Nissan Patrols or Toyota Land Cruisers is what we use.
Yeah.
And that's what you need, because in some of these areas, there are nothing except the 4x4 will do well. Sometimes van might get through, but it's going to get destroyed. So it's unfortunately, those are some of the things that we have to do in order to get to these amazing places to take beautiful pictures of landscapes that are disappearing.
Yeah.
And that's just one of those situations. That's real life, unless you're willing to walk somewhere, which is not going to happen.
It's really hard.
But the other, I do follow the leave no trace ethos nonetheless. I always go someplace and I leave it better than I found it. And if there's trash, I pick it up. And and then we take it with us, and we obviously don't leave anything. And like I remember one time we did a trek on one of the Inca trails in Bolivia, and I hired a group of 10 people from a village. I said, okay, we're doing this trek over 4 days, which is normally a 3-day trek. We're going to pick up the garbage along the route. And there was a ton of it, like bags and bags.
Yeah,
and whenever we get to our campsite, we're going to make a fire and we're going to burn all that trash as much as we can. And then in the morning, we're going to pick up all that garbage that we burnt and put it into bags and carry it out to the end of the trail. And they looked at me like, what are you talking about? Why are you going to do that with that trash? Yeah. And to me, it was really quite simple. Like, I want to hike an Inca trail that takes me to the Andes, from the Andes to the jungle. And I don't want to see trash everywhere.
Right.
And the trash usually comes from the locals, not usually the foreigners. The foreigners have a different education and a different mentality. But I did that once, and it cost me a bunch of money because, you got to feed 10 people for 4 days.
Right.
And so you have to feed them, and then you have to get them transport back out, and then you got to pay them their daily wage and whatever. So I did that. I said, you know what? I can't be doing that. It's just too expensive for me as a person. So I just basically said, look, everybody who comes with us, like, okay, you got to, no trash. We give people like aluminum bottles as an example. We say, okay, we're going to avoid using plastic bottles as much as we can. So we buy the big jugs as much as we can.
Yeah.
And then we refill your bottles, and then each bottle, and then we'll tag your bottle with your name on it or put something on it so that you're not sharing your bottle with anyone else and whatever. But it's hard to do, man. I mean,
it's hard.
It all goes down to an education of the most basic level.
Yeah, and in some of these places that we go around the world, it's a different level of life, and they're just they're not exposed. They're not concerned about that stuff. They're just doing what they can just to get by. So,
exactly. Yeah. That's the reality. I mean, I find it funny that people in quote unquote civilized countries or more advanced countries or whatever you want to call them have these things. Oh yeah, we got to save the planet, but they're the ones that do the vast majority of the pollution. I mean, look at some of those soft drink companies without naming anyone specifically. Yeah. They're like the biggest producer of plastic bottles in the world, and you'll find them everywhere.
Soft drinking water. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you're done with your bottle, and then you toss it. Or maybe you put it in the garbage can, and they pick up in the garbage can and they take it to this big landfill, and then the landfill breaks and then it goes into the nearest river. I mean, you've been to Kathmandu. I mean, Kathmandu, I've been to places that I thought were nasty, but Kathmandu wins by a long shot. How terrible.
Arusha in Africa. Same kind of thing.
It blew my mind. I mean, I got the Kathmandu cough within hours of arriving in Kathmandu.
Right. Yeah. That's scary.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to an aspiring outdoor photographer looking to make a name for themselves in the industry?
Oh, yeah.
It's tough these days. There's a lot of them.
There are amazing athletes and adventurers that go into places that I would love to be with them. And they are also really great photographers or videographers and whatever. And so there's a lot of competition. The other thing is that the usual venues of years ago where there was magazines and books and whatever, they kind of are disappearing and there's some consolidation going on. But at the same time, you have the internet. You can make your own channel. Now you don't need anyone. You could just make your own. Yeah. You can make your own channel on YouTube or have your own thing and you can get your stuff out there. And what you got to do is you got to be passionate about what you do, but also you got to be realistic. I mean, passion is one thing. I got plenty of passion, but passion doesn't pay the rent. Passion doesn't pay the car bills, and passion doesn't buy food. Yeah. So I suggest hang on, get a job. Maybe it's not the job of a lifetime, but it's a job that brings in money. The money is used to make sure that you have food on the table and a roof over your head and hopefully some health insurance. Because if you're going to go out there and do extreme stuff, you better have some health insurance. Right?
That's right.
And keep doing that and go out and you can do the weekend warrior thing, or maybe call in slick on a Friday and have a 3-day weekend or whatever. Go do those things and go and do the best work that you can, put it out there and try to network with whomever, because you never know who knows who. I run into people who I thought they were just normal Joe Blow or Mary Smith and whatever. And then in turn, they knew this other person who knew another person. And they said, hey, Sergio, I heard that you do these things. I'm a producer and we're doing films and we're going to go down to Bolivia. Can you help us out? I said, yeah, sure, no problem. And so jobs came out of situations in which I met someone through someone else that they met someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I did lots of productions. I would provide all the logistics for film crews and whatever in Bolivia for like Aspen Productions and American Adventure Productions over many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But those came because someone knew of me for some reason, because I had a photo or I knew someone else that I ran into. So that networking is critical. Yeah, you got to do your proper website. You got to do your SEO and all that stuff that they keep telling us that you need to do.
Yeah.
But in the end, the networking is really what is going to count.
Yeah.
And be real, man. Don't be fake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't be pushed. Because I got to know this guy because he's the number one climber or the kayaker, and I got to become his friend. And even though you're only doing that because you want to get exposure, the reality is that people will see through that. You got to be honest about you, who you are, and also be honest about your skills.
Yeah.
If your skills are really that good, they'll speak for themselves. If they're kind of mediocre, they will also speak for themselves.
That's right. That's right. You get found out, won't get anything. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good advice, because you're right. You never know who you're going to meet, and you can always learn something from everybody. So
yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
You should just be nice, man. There's a lot of great people out there. You should be nice to people. You should say hello, good morning, good afternoon, how's it going? Smile, body language. All that stuff is basic human interaction stuff. And what I find distressing actually is that everybody's walking around, whether they're indoor, outdoor, or in the middle of this amazing view. They got their nose stuck on that 2x3-inch screen.
Yeah, right.
Like tapping away, like I got to get my Instagram thing, I got to get my face, I got to see what they're saying on Facebook or whatever method or thing that you dig. Those things they're good up to a point, but man, they are very addictive. And it's not about your phone. It's about you living that moment, because you're not going to capture the essence of living that moment with a phone.
Get one shot at that moment. Yep, that's right.
Yeah, you take a photo. I mean, I take photos, but I also take the time to sit down and enjoy and look around and take a deep breath and be thankful for what I'm able to enjoy, that I'm not stuck in a cubicle, doing a job that I absolutely hate.
Yeah.
That's
good advice.
Yeah.
So you have a diverse range of subjects that you shoot. Do you have one of those categories that's a favorite? Your landscape, storms?
I've always been a landscape guy. I mean, the landscape for me speaks loudly and clearly, and I listen to it. And even walking around out of my house, and I go around, I have this little loop that I do in the mornings, anywhere from 3 to 5 miles that I walk in the morning early. Mm-hmm. And I go around this little lake, and every time I go, there's a new view of the lake and the mountains, and I can see Long's Peak from where I am in Lafayette, and I can see the Rockies. And I've done that loop, I mean, hundreds of times now, and I've taken some really beautiful photos as a quick snap, like, hey, this is not going to happen again. And I do that because the landscape always is showing me it's the same landscape, nothing has moved.
Yeah.
But the light's different, the clouds are different, the atmosphere is different. There's something going on. And so I'm a landscape lover. That's what I do best.
Me too.
But I can do a few other things.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's amazing too how it really, man, I don't think I live in Bishop. We have some great sunrises and sunsets and all kinds of other great things to shoot, but it never seems like it's the same twice.
Yeah, never.
Always different.
Yep. And that's the thing. That's the thing as far as like about the photography part. Whenever you see something, you should take that photo right there and then. Yeah. Because you're never, ever going to see that again. Yeah. And that could be that one photo. You never know, man.
Right. You never know. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Do you have any tips for capturing compelling images in challenging adverse weather conditions?
Well, I mean, if you're going to go out and shoot someplace, whether it's just for yourself or it's a job or something, what you got to figure out is where is it what altitude it's in and what the weather patterns or what the season is that you're in. So you got to find out all that stuff first and find, okay, so I'm going to the Yukon. Okay. I'm going to go in the summer. Okay. So what's there in the summer? Okay. There could be thunderstorms or rain or lots of mosquitoes. So mosquitoes could be problematic. Bears could be, but maybe they're the problem. Maybe they're not. Melting rivers, the water, the rising rivers. All of a sudden you get a hot spell of a week and all of a sudden the rivers rise 2, 3, 4, 5 feet.
It's raining 20 miles away and all of a sudden the
crossing.
rivers rise, right? That happens.
Yeah, you got a problem. And so all those things are important. You also got to look into the logistics of it. Okay, how do I get there? Okay, so you got to take a plane to Anchorage or wherever you need to go. Then from there, you got to go to Whitehorse and then you got to go from another place. So you got a big plane, medium plane, small plane, and then you start walking. Maybe you got to do a canoe or whatever. All those transportation and logistics are really important to think through carefully. Mm-hmm. And while you're doing all that, saying, okay, am I carrying all this stuff by myself or am I going to be with other folks, one other person, 3 other people, 10 other people? How much volume, like if I'm going to be out someplace for 10 days, as an example, kind of extreme example, maybe 10 days. Okay. I got to make a pile of food that's going to feed me breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 10 days. And that doesn't mean that you're going to eat like a pig, but you got to have enough nutrition to do what you need to do.
Yeah,
so you make a pile, say, wow, that's like 2 by 3 feet. And then put in your sleeping bag and your tent, and then maybe your bear spray, and then your bag of camera gear, add your tripod, boots, maybe
adds
pack
up quick.
raft.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you went from 25 pounds real basic ultralight to like 65 pounds in a matter of minutes, and you got to carry all that stuff.
Right. Or 100 pounds. Yeah.
I always, outward bound. You got to suffer. The way I look at it is like, I want to go with the absolute minimum that I can, and one item has to do 2 or 3 jobs.
Yeah.
And like, I know some people are real fans of sporks. I'm not a fan of sporks, man. Sporks are terrible. First of all, they don't hold any liquid, and the fork is terrible.
Yeah.
So I just take a fork and a big spoon.
Yeah.
And I'm done.
Yeah.
And the difference between my proper fork and my proper spoon in a spork might be what, 2 ounces?
Negligible. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like nonsense. Cutting your toothbrush in half. It's like, give me a break, man. Give me a break. That's ridiculous. If anything, I'll take an extra battery and leave my lens caps.
Right.
And take off that big, thick, fancy strap on your camera and put like some P-cord on it.
Right.
It won't be comfortable, but it's a lot lighter.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. No, that's good advice. Yeah.
So,
you got any exciting projects coming up?
Well, yeah, I've got lots of things coming up. I mean, there's a project that I want to do a book about the Bolivian Andes, which I've already began years ago. It's about the Andes in Bolivia that still have glaciers.
Oh, wow.
The Andes in general have lost about 50% of their glaciers. Just about, I think, 3 months ago, the last glacier in Venezuela disappeared. So Venezuela has no more glaciers. Colombia is in real deep trouble with their glaciers. Bolivia has lost 40 to 50% of their glaciers. Peru is around that as well. So my book is about the remaining Andes mountains that have glaciers and the bogs up high. And it's all about the landscapes and the people in the Andes. And so there's probably 5 or 6 ranges in Bolivia that have some glaciers left.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Apolobamba, the Real, Quimsa Cruz, and a couple of further south that have some glaciers left. I want to photograph that before they're gone. Because I used to be playing in those mountains.
Right, you've seen those
when there were actually glaciers. Right. Like Chacaltaya, where there used to be a ski resort, it's all stone now. There's nothing. It's been gone for 25 years.
Wow, yeah.
There's no glacier on that thing. And I remember skiing that glacier, and it was the greatest views of all time.
Yeah.
And so I want to do that, but I also want to do a documentary. I want to do a documentary. I want to film the process of doing a book about that.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's like, okay, this is how you do a project. So get a crew of maybe 2 people to film me photographing the Andes. And me being a participant, not just being, I want to be in front of the camera. I want to talk about my experiences. I want to talk to the people there. because the farmers are suffering on both
I can
sides of the
imagine.
mountain.
Right. Yeah.
The water is drying up, so they don't have the crops, and
They're
so
losing
they're
their livelihood and their
yep,
way of life, their home.
exactly.
Wow.
They're
Yeah.
losing some of their
Yeah.
customs, and they're going to the big city, to El
Yeah.
Alto and
Yeah.
La Paz and other cities, and so they go from being a farmer to a farmer that is broke in the middle of this massive city that has 1 million people, and they're out in the streets,
And they have no skills. What are
selling
they going to do? They
trinkets.
can't. How are they going to get a job? Yeah.
Yeah, they
It's
have no
tough.
education or very little, if any,
Yeah.
etc. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, and I want to
Mhm.
capture that before I expire.
Yeah.
I'm no
Yeah.
spring chicken, but I want to capture that because I've already done a couple of books. I did a book on the Altiplano, and
Mhm.
then I did a book on Madidi National Park.
Mhm.
And so this is the one it's been in design phase for the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
haven't had the time
Yeah.
to dedicate to it. And also, yeah, time you could have, but what you don't have, sometimes you don't have is money.
Right.
And so
Right.
money is required to do a book,
Yeah.
and
That
money
sounds
is
like a
required
good
to do a
program, though. It
documentary.
sounds like you'd be able to find somebody to help you finance that.
I think I can. Honestly, what I'm trying to juggle right now is juggle the realities of post-pandemic, getting an adventure travel company, for a photographic tour company,
Yeah.
to have barely survived the pandemic.
Yeah.
It actually went into hibernation mode for a couple of years because of the pandemic. Now I'm kind of reviving it, and so expanding from Bolivia to Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, and Argentina. So I have 6 countries that I'm expanding my photographic tours to. And so it's challenging.
Different world since the
There's a
pandemic.
lot of
Yeah.
work that needs to
Hmm.
be done,
Yeah.
you
No,
know?
that's like a great project.
Yeah.
Fun. So, do you have a favorite piece of gear that you have with you all the time that's under $100?
Oh, I have a lot of things that are on $100, man. $100 is a lot of
Oh, you're
money.
the first. You're the first one that said that to me. Everybody struggles with this one.
Uh, well,
Under $100 is tough.
yeah, well, $100 doesn't buy you anything nowadays. But the one thing for sure that I always have is a headlamp.
It's a good one. Yeah.
Headlamp is something that can always be useful for whatever reason, because a lot of people tend to rely on their phones for their light, right? But
Yeah.
what that does, it just sucks the battery off your phone, and then your phone is dead.
Yeah. And you can't fix the camera. You got to hold the light. Yeah.
Exactly. So a
Yeah.
headlamp is good for like getting up in the middle of the night so you don't stub your toe,
Hmm.
so you don't trip and fall into the shower when you're trying to go to the bathroom,
Yeah.
fixing something underneath the car,
Yeah.
or you drop something on the carpet and like you can't see it, especially people of certain age, our eyesight is going quickly.
That's
And
right.
so headlamp's a good thing to have.
Going.
So,
It's
I
gone. What
like
do you mean going?
a good proper pocket knife is nice to
That's a
have,
good one
man.
too. Yeah.
A proper pocket knife. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be useful,
Mhm.
something that'll help you do certain things.
Yeah. Those are both good ones. Yep. How about my favorite book? Do you read a lot? You must get a lot of time on airplanes and things to.
Well, I used to read a lot. Unfortunately, I find the font size on the books is getting either I'm going blind or they're getting smaller because they want to use less pages. I don't have any particular book that I have as a fave, but I like any book that deals with exploration and historical stuff that says, yeah, these caves we found a set of tablets. We don't know where they're from. Or like Colonel Percy Fawcett, this British explorer that's
Yeah.
very famous in South America, who actually in his heyday around the turn of the century designed the borders between Brazil and Bolivia. And then he disappeared in what is now Brazil, but used to be Bolivia in northeastern. What used to be northeastern Bolivia is now Brazil. He disappeared many years ago in the early 1900s. Things about exploration and where people really had to be explorers, where they had to go, they actually suffered, and they had to have
Story. Yeah.
they didn't have DEET, or they didn't have
Right.
satellite phones, or they didn't have anything. They had
Right.
to rely on their wits, and they had
Yeah.
to learn how to cook whatever, make a fire, protect themselves from animals or possibly hostile people that didn't want them in their territory. That's real deal right there. I
Yeah.
love that
That's right.
stuff.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's great. And if people want to follow up, what's the best way they can find you, reach you?
Well, a good way is always go to my website at sergiophototours.com. So
Okay.
that's Sergiophoto tours.com. And there's all kinds of ways you can get a hold of me. You can send me an email from there, or you can look at some of the photo tours that I offer. You can always go to sergiophoto.com. That's my photography website.
Cool.
And you can see a bunch of different things that I've photographed over the years, different kind of subject matter. That could be interesting for some folks.
Yeah, hey, awesome. Well, we'll link to those two things in the show notes. That's awesome.
I appreciate that. Thank
Well, it's
you.
been great talking to you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure, and I'm glad that we had a little bit of time to share a few moments, and hopefully we can do this again in the future. Hopefully in real life, outdoors.
We can do it somewhere together. Exactly. That's what we need.
Yes.
To do next time.
Yeah.
Yep,
So
that'd be great.
you're invited to Bolivia.
Thank you.
Well, make it happen.
Yep.
All right, my friend.
Unleash your story and watch your brand thrive with Rome Generation PR. In the flood of content these days, brands often find themselves lost at sea, struggling to connect and engage with the right audience at the right time. Rome Generation PR is your lifeline. They'll seamlessly connect your brand story with the ideal audience, driving results to make your brand thrive. Founded on a yacht while sailing around the world, they bring a unique perspective to public relations because they live the lifestyle their partners represent. With a passion for discovery, they've been shining a spotlight on bold, pioneering brands in the travel, adventure, and lifestyle sectors worldwide for years now. Want to know more? Visit RomeGeneration.com and let them help your brand navigate the world of media and outdoor adventure and unleash your story today.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, ricksays.com, where you'll find show notes and links to everything we talked about and more. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or spread the word and tell a friend. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week, and thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Adventure Lifestyle Podcast.